Solar power accounts for only a small percentage of American electricity generation. In 2015, it contributed only 1% to the country's total. But the U.S. Department of Energy reports over the last 6 years, solar panel costs have fallen more than 60%, and the price for a system has been cut in half. Nebraska Extension educator John Hay says companies are now more interested in developing land for solar farms, as illustrated by inquiries from Nebraska farmers asking how leases would work. We talked with John recently about why this has now become a more prominent issue.
Well, we're seeing a lot of companies interested in leasing land for solar, and they're advertising across the state. And so with that, farmers and ranchers and landowners are interested in maybe leasing their land for solar, make some dollars on those acres. And the fact is that solar has come down in price dramatically, and that price decline has spurred more interest in building solar farms.
Outline for me how an agreement like this would work.
When we look at a solar lease agreement, a lot of them are proprietary, so we don't know all the details, but if we're going to compare them to a wind lease, they're going to be fairly long, maybe 20, 30 years in length, with sometimes an extension to increase them to another 20 or 30 years. So we're looking at a 30 to 50 year agreement. We're looking at a lease agreement that's going to lease a plot of land, maybe 50 or 100 acres. And unlike a wind lease we can farm around those wind turbines. A solar lease, you can picture that 100 acres just being a fence around it, and we don't have access to it. So it's a little different, but it's somewhat similar.
What's the price structure you're looking at?
Well, a lot of times what I've read about is a dollar amount per year per acre, and that dollar amount is going to vary. And I'm not sure quite where that should be, but that's where somebody that's educated, like an attorney that knows about wind leases, could help with getting the right dollar amount, but also help with the other parts of the agreement, the liability, and some of the other issues that really need to be in place.
That's the follow-up question here. What do landowners need to ask about if they're approached with something like this?
Well, I think if they're interested in having a solar farm, I think that it could be an opportunity, and I think there could be some money involved that would make it worthwhile for them to look at. But because these are long-term agreements, they're going to want to have legal advice. Some sort of legal advice is important for any contract, but these are long contracts that maybe your kids or your grandkids are going to have to deal with. So get some legal advice from an attorney. And you're looking at things like liability and impacts to the property and dollar amounts and a number of other issues.
Some of the questions that I would have: what happens at the end of that lease? Who decommissions? What happens if the business goes under and there's no money at the end? Go over those.
No, those are excellent questions and things
John.
that all should be should be dealt with in the agreement. And I tell people a lot with wind agreements that when you talk to someone about that agreement, what you said doesn't really mean anything. What's in the contract is what means something, because that's who you're going to have to live up to. And if that lease gets sold to another company or another company or another company, really the only connection you have is that contract. And so you need to have that in good order. And things like decommissioning and other things, some of those questions are somewhat dealt with in county zoning or state law, but you really need them in that contract to have them make sure that you're covered.
You mentioned wind farms earlier. What parallels are there to these and wind farms?
Well, I mean, in both situations, the company is leasing a piece of land for access to some energy development, and the lease is the access to that land for a long period of time. And so, I think that there is a lot of parallels. The things that are different are just that a wind farm, you're going to farm around that, really taking almost very few acres out of production. In this situation, you're going to take every acre that they lease out of production. So if it's 100 acres, that 100 acres, it's just got a fence around it. And though that's not all bad, it's just different.